Ladies, do you want to know how to get a man to respect you? If you've been struggling with feeling like maybe men don't respect you, this episode of Wonderful Life is for you. We're going to talk about 3 ways to gain a man's respect. Hi, I'm Mary Dittman. I'm an award-winning business professor on the collegiate level and the creator of College on Fleek and One-Derful Life. Wonderful Life is my way of describing how it feels when you're at peace with your singleness. It doesn't mean that you would prefer to be single, but you're happy while you're single, not necessarily because you're single. In my case, I've always wanted to be married and have a family, but I'm well over 40. I've never been married and I don't have any children, and I've always wanted that, but it hasn't happened for me. And for a long time, that was really a source of sadness for me. And I really didn't think that I could ever be happy if I was single. But I figured out I needed to make peace with my singleness and figure out how to get happy because the singleness didn't seem to be changing. And that's what Wonderful Life is all about. It's not about giving up and resigning yourself to a life alone. It's about having a great life while you're single. And then hopefully if your Mr. Right comes along, you're happy and he's attracted to that. But if he doesn't come along, you're still happy anyway. Now, I wrote a blog on this, so you can go to wonderfullife.com and check out the blog, as well as past episodes of the show or other blogs that I've written. That's at wonderfullife.com. But let's talk about how to gain a man's respect. And a lot of times we devalue ourselves in relationships. Many times when we think a man doesn't respect us or he doesn't cherish us or value us, many times that's because of the way that we are behaving. And so here's some things to pay attention to if you feel like you're not being respected. The first thing you might be doing that would cause a man to not respect you is you devalue yourself by waiving your standards or not having standards. But it's the same difference whether you don't have any standards or you have standards but you waive them. When you lower your standards and you compromise and make exceptions, you're basically putting yourself on the discount rack. And why would a man treat you like a queen when you've already just knocked yourself down to a sale price? If you want to be respected, then you have to keep your standard pretty high, because if you're just willing to settle for anyone who tells you you're pretty, then that's really not a lot to respect. I dated a man who I would say had a drinking problem, and it bothered me how much he drank. I really loved him. I felt like maybe I could address the drinking behavior later in the relationship. Now, not too long after we broke up, I heard a college student on YouTube saying she was to go on a date. The guy showed up at her apartment and was a little bit tipsy, like not drunk, but just kind of clearly had had a couple of drinks already. And she looked at him and said, "Are you drunk? You've been drinking?" And he said, "Well, yeah, I've had a couple of beers." And she said, "Well, I'm not going out with you. Not tonight and not ever." And she would not go out with him, and she closed the door in his face. And I thought, oh my God, good for her. And gee whiz, here's a probably 22-year-old college student who figured that out, and I'm in my 40s and hadn't figured that out yet. That was a fantastic standard. What she was saying was, you don't get to spend time with me if you're drunk. That is an excellent standard to have, because why would you respect a woman who would accept that type of behavior? In a previous episode, I talked about a friend of mine who's a flight attendant and how airline pilots have a list. And there are certain items that when they go through that pre-flight checklist, if those items are on the no-go list, the flight is a no-go. Things like, oh, we've got a flat tire, or there's 0 oil pressure in engine number 3, Things like anything like that is a no-go. The flight doesn't go. And in that way, you need to have some deal breakers on your list. It might be something like, if the guy drinks too much in my presence, that's it. That's a no-go. We're done. Or maybe it's if he has a criminal record, or if he doesn't have a job. You have to decide for yourself what those deal breakers are. But once you've decided on them, do not compromise on them and don't deviate from them, because then you're not a woman of your word and it's going to be hard to respect you. The second thing that we do sometimes to devalue ourselves and that cost us a man's respect are that we make excuses for disrespectful behavior. When I was dating the guy who drank so much, I used to make excuses for it and say, well, you know, that's just what men do when they're out on the boat or when they're out golfing all day. But you know what? No, it's not. They don't get knee walking drunk all the time. This guy did, and that was unacceptable. I wish that I had addressed it and put my foot down and stood up for myself, but I didn't. Another guy that I dated used to be late all the time to pick me up, and I didn't want to be difficult, I didn't want to be negative, and so I would always say, oh, it's okay, but it wasn't. I was irritated and hungry, and I don't mean he was 10 minutes late, I mean he was like an hour late, and that's unacceptable. That's disrespectful of you and your time. And when you put up with disrespectful behavior, you're telling the person it's okay for them to treat you like that, and they're going to continue to do it. So you can't make an excuse for it and say, well, I don't want to be difficult, or I don't want to hurt his feelings. You have to create boundaries. It's not good for the other person when you allow them to disrespect you and you don't say anything and they don't understand that they're disrespecting you, because every time it happens, you're becoming resentful of him, and then all of a sudden you're going to blow up on him, and he's not going to have any idea what you are even talking. He has no clue that you were upset because you never said anything, and now all of a sudden you're losing it, and that's not fair for him. People can't operate in a vacuum. You have to be clear about what type of behavior is acceptable and is not acceptable, and have those standards for yourself and for the people around you. It is not good for anyone if you're accepting that your boyfriend is always late to pick you up, if that's something that's important to you, and you're training him it's okay to disrespect other people's time, because what if he has a big meeting and he figures, well, people don't care if you're on time or not. So it's certainly not your job to help a man with every area of his life, but you can help him be good for you. Men want to make women happy. Men want us to be happy. They want us to respect them and be excited to see them. So make it easier for them, not by just letting them do whatever they want. Make it easier by being clear what you will and will not accept, and don't make excuses for that disrespectful behavior. I would say the third way that we devalue ourselves and lose respect for men is we don't use our words. We don't speak up. For me, this was because I didn't want to come across as controlling or negative or bitchy or judgmental, and I wanted the man to just know that he had the freedom to be his own person, and that's fine, but nobody has the freedom to treat you poorly or to disrespect you. You have the freedom to say no to that. And I historically was not good about saying, you know what, that bothered me, or that offended me, or that hurt my feelings. What I should have done when Mr. Tardy would call me and say, well, instead of being there at 6, it's going to be 7. What I should have said was, you know what, let's just reschedule, and canceled the date. Or if he called and said, I'm going to be 30 minutes late, I could say, you know what, that doesn't work for me, let's do it some other time. Or if it got to be 10 minutes after and he wasn't there, I could have left. And then he could have called me and been like, hey, I'm at your house, where are you? And I could have said, well, you didn't show up, I went and did something else. Like, use your words and set a boundary. Don't go into this whole like, I have abandonment issues because my dad wasn't there for my 4th birthday, or whatever your thing is. Like, don't get into all that. Just address the behavior right then. Hey, I'm a busy person. I'm not going to sit around and wait for you. If you're going to be late, give me a phone call. If you're not going to give me a call, I'm going to leave. Men respect a direct communication. You don't have to cry, you don't have to scream, you don't have to make him feel guilty, but use your words. People can't read your mind. You've got to communicate and tell them what you want and need. And I used to think, well, I don't want to say anything because I don't want him to feel bad. But why is it okay for me to be upset and me to feel bad but not the other person when it's the other person's behavior that's the problem? Speaking up doesn't make you a bad guy. Speaking up makes you clear and transparent and easy to deal with. Now, obviously, don't be unreasonable. If it's been 2.5 minutes when he shows up, he said he was going to pick you up at 7 and he's there at 7:03. Don't be a jerk about it. But for me, I would say if it's 7:15 and you haven't heard anything, he was supposed to be at your house at 7, I'd either send him a text and say, you're not here, let's reschedule, or actually what I would do is just leave and let him figure out, oh, I'm late, what happened? Unless you just have unlimited time and you can afford for someone else to keep you sitting around waiting. If you're okay with that, then great. I think one of the things that confuses women on this idea of respect is so much of what we see on television and in the movies will be these storylines where a man will just take the woman for granted and he doesn't value her and he doesn't realize how wonderful she's just great and wonderful and she's there for him all the time and he just doesn't get it. And then something happens and he realizes that she was so wonderful, I can't let her get away. And all of a sudden he recognizes that she was it. And he runs out, runs to the airport and stops her from getting on the plane and leaving, or, stops her from marrying the other guy. But in reality, if a man doesn't value you and you allow that to go on, whether it's months or years, he is not going to wake up one day and suddenly see you as a woman of value, because he has not seen you as having value for X number of years. So why would he start? It's kind of like the old logic about if a bully is picking on a little kid, a lot of times the parents eventually might say to the child, you know what, stand up to the bully. When he starts pushing you around, punch him in the face. Okay, now we're not advocating for any type of physical violence here at One-Derful Life, but many of us had the experience that if we were being bullied, we just kind of tried to be nice. The bully, that was just fuel on the fire. Where if you finally stood up to the bully and told him off, or, pushed back, the bully would respect you. And the same is true a lot of times with men. When you stand up and you push back, not physically, I'm talking about when you stand up for yourself, they respect that. Now, will they get angry in the moment? Possibly. Will you hear some whining and complaining? Possibly. When you put your foot down, it's possible that he's going to leave. Even if that happens, one of two things. Number one, and he's gone, you're better off without him because he didn't respect you. But number two, many times what'll happen is he might kind of storm off and he'll cool down and think about it and realize, uh-oh, yeah, I've been treating her badly. And if he decides that you really are someone of value, he will come back and he will change what he's been doing. I dated someone one time that he would always talk about his ex-girlfriend. Always, always, always. And it was a painful breakup for him. And he would say things like, gosh, Mary, I just feel like I can talk to you about anything. It really helps me to talk to you. And so I felt kind of guilty about gosh, I'm really sick of hearing about his ex-girlfriend. He's on a date with me. But he was saying oh, thank you so much for listening. It really helps me. I just feel like I can talk to you all the time. And I kind of felt like I was trying to be helpful and compassionate, because that's how women are. We like to tend and mend. Until finally one day I'd had enough. And I looked at him and I said, if I hear one more thing about your stupid ex-girlfriend, I'm gonna scream. I do not want to hear her name ever again. And the next time you say her name, I'm gonna get up and leave. And he was really shocked. I mean, he was like, oh my God, because, for a couple of months I had let this behavior continue. Well, that's disrespectful. When he's on a date with me, he should not be talking on and on and on and on about his ex-girlfriend. But the problem was I let it continue. And because I was letting it continue, I was letting him know it's okay for you to talk about other women. Now, when I put my foot down on that, he quit doing it. And he did get angry. He said, well, how come it's been all right and then now all of a sudden you don't want to hear about it? And I owned up. I said, listen, it's really been a problem all along and I haven't said anything about it, and that's on me. But I'm tired of hearing about it. Go get a therapist. I'm not your therapist. He got pretty steamed about it, but he took a couple of days and he thought about it and he realized, he said, you're right. I ought not to be talking about my ex-girlfriend with you all the time. That's over and I'm trying to get to know you. Yeah, that is not unreasonable, ladies. When you have standards for how you are to be treated. Now, if your standard is going to be, he's got to bring me a dozen long stem roses to every date, I don't know, that might be a bit much. You're going to severely limit your dating pool. But for sure, he should be treating you nicely on every date. He should be on time. He should do what he says he's going to do. If he says, I'm going to call you on Tuesday night, he should call you on Tuesday night. If he says, we're going to go out this weekend, then you should be going out this weekend, unless something comes up and he lets you know pretty quickly, we were going to go out this weekend, but I have to take care of my kids, it turns out. The level of respect that a man is going to show you is very much based on the behavior that you tolerate from him. Dr. Phil says we teach other people how to treat us, and that is true. And you generally cannot go from allowing someone to disrespect you to all of a sudden they respect you. That is virtually impossible. You have to start out with being a person that can be respected. And I think part of the reason that this is important is it shows that you have respect for yourself. The way that you allow other people to treat you is a reflection of how you see yourself. The one person you're always going to have a relationship with is you. So if you don't respect yourself enough to require that someone be on time and sober, then why would he respect you enough to behave appropriately? So it really begins with you respecting yourself and then being clear with him, this is the standard that you need to be at if we're going to spend time together. And then he can make a decision. If his decision is, no, I really would rather drink, then okay, you can go do that, just not around me. Well, I would really like to hear what you struggle with in your singleness, or anything that you would like to hear more about here on One-Derful Life. And as always, you can connect with us at wonderfullife.com. And make sure you join us next week when we're going to talk about fantasy relationships and how to get out of them. That's next time here on One-Derful Life.